Thank you for joining us on Newsweek as we highlight the top stories that occurred during the course of the week. It has been an interesting political times in the last few days in what marked the end of the road for the People's Democratic Party and its candidate Atiku Abubakar regarding the 2019 presidential election. After exhausting all avenues of seeking legal redress, the Supreme Court dismissed Atiku's appeal challenging the victory of President Buhari in the election. The last few days has also seen uproar in response to Operation Positive Identification by the Nigerian Army. Military sources say the exercise is aimed at checkmating activities of bandits, kidnappers, armed robbers, ethnic militias and those engaged in other crimes across the country. The media on Wednesday was buzzing, perhaps the biggest story in Nigeria. The Supreme Court dismissed the petition filed by the People's Democratic Party and its presidential candidate over the presidential election.
A 7-member panel of the Justices of the Supreme Court, led by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Tanko Mohammed, has dismissed the petition filed by the PDP and its presidential candidates. The Chief Justice of Nigeria said the reasons for the decision of the court will be communicated to parties at a later date. He disclosed that members of the panel had read all the documents and exhibits filed in the case for 2 weeks and found their appeal to be lacking in merit.
The matter has been finally settled by the Supreme Court. We want to appreciate and then commend the Supreme Court for rising up to the occasion.
The Supreme Court has adopted a strategy that sought to deal with these issues expeditiously, such that Nigerians are not detained in fear, in doubt, and all manners of investors are not sure about what is to come and so on. I think the issue of the election is now behind us, and I believe the government, the people of Nigeria will work in unison to take the Nigeria project to the next level.
The chapter, paragraphs and lines having to do with 2019 election, especially the presidential aspect, has been laid to rest until 2023.
This election and the judgment is not about President Buhari or His Excellency Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. It is about the future of our country.
We have done the best we could under the strangulating regime of electoral jurisprudence, which not only places undue burden on the petitioner, but also timelines, the period within which such burden must be discharged.
If I borrow the words President Muhammadu Buhari used in 2007, this is ridiculous, this is a joke, this is shocking and devastating to the quest of Nigerian people.
The judgment, which was unanimously delivered, came less than an hour after the court took arguments on the appeal.
And in the judgment that reaffirmed the re-election of President Buhari for a second term in office, the court examined all the briefs and exhibits for more than 2 weeks and agreed that there is no merit in the appeal filed by Atiku Abubakar and the People's Democratic Party.
The ruling of the Supreme Court may be a bitter pill to swallow for the opposition People's Democratic Party, but its presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar believes it is part of democratic challenges we must face as a nation. He says in a democracy, you need a strong judiciary, a free press, and an impartial electoral umpire. But Nigeria has none of those three elements as at today. The legal tussle over the presidential election lasted for 8 months, and supporters of the two leading parties were on the edge over the likely outcome of the Supreme Court's verdicts. The court's judgment raised some people's hopes and dashed that of others.
The matter has been finally settled by the Supreme Court. We want to appreciate and then commend the Supreme Court for rising up to the occasion. That's the way it should be, and the judiciary has done well.
Even President Muhammadu Buhari in faraway Saudi Arabia attending the Future Investment Initiative is pleased by this outcome. He can now face governance squarely without the distractions that come with the uncertainty of a lawsuit.
The Supreme Court has virtually validated or increased the confidence of the lower courts and tribunals that already passed the judgment. So Supreme Court is resuscitating the confidence of Nigerians on all the judicial processes from downstairs up to the highest point. So I'm very pleased with this development.
State governors in the fold of the Progressive Governors Forum have also congratulated Mr. President and the APC for this hard-earned victory after a keenly contested election that frayed nerves across the country. But beyond election petitions and the judgment of the Supreme Court in favor of the APC and President Buhari is the growing conversation to strengthen democracy and also improve the electoral process in order to gain the trust of Nigerians.
Joining me in the studio to discuss this is Tony Daniel, lawyer and human rights activist. Good to have you now. And so I have my correspondent, Atiku James, joining me to analyze this matter as well. But let's begin with you now, Tony Daniel. What are your thoughts now on this exercise where we know that the outcome of elections conducted in Nigeria is usually concluded in the courtrooms?
Well, in the current republic, starting from 1999, the current president has shown that he's a very good Democrat. Shown in the sense that in 2003, 2007, 2011, he contested the result of presidential elections up to the Supreme Court. When Falai and Obasanjo contested in 1999, Falai ended at the Court of Appeal. And the history of Supreme Court decisions in respect of presidential election, the incumbent has always had to, get the day. And though I've not had the reason, I've had the decision, I'm not too surprised. However, I read, and I want to refer to this, because Professor Ben Wambueze is an authority on constitutional law, and I know when I was his law student, I read the book, but I respectfully disagree with him when he said, looking at Section 36 on fair hearing, he tried to fault the decision of the Supreme Court by saying that where was the judgment made? It was an appeal. And every appeal, what you do is to come and adopt your written address. You are not supposed to start arguing any fresh point, except by the leave of the appellate court. So, to that extent, they couldn't have come to argue judgment. A judgment is given when the judge takes the position of canvassed by both parties and their lawyers, the processes that have been filed, retire to the chambers or to his house, and comes back to deliver judgment. The process of delivering judgment is not done inside the court. And so to that extent, with utmost respect to the erudite scholar, I disagree with him. So the decision of the Supreme Court, until we hear the reason, there's nothing we can do anyway, but we can do objective criticism and observation. I have not seen any problem there as a lawyer. But let us wait and read the reason for that. Well, I think we should put that behind us, just like our learned SY President Olanipekun said, that we should concentrate on governance now, and at least the president can now govern without fear of the unexpected, So, and the only thing I would say about governance is first, take it up on what we are supposed to be enjoying in our democratic dispensation, obedience to court order.
Atiku, From your perspective now, what do you make of this exercise where elections in Nigeria usually end in courtrooms, aside from when it's being conducted at the polls? What are your thoughts?
This, I think, is quite worrisome, because once it comes to elections are supposed to be concluded on the field, that is on the election days, because once people, resort to always going to the courts, to try and see if they can twist the judiciary to give them victory is always very, very hard tasking, and also time wasting. I'll put it that way, because sometimes the people who spend days for campaigns, most of them sometimes going out, for these campaigns, as well as spending money and time trying to see that, okay, fine, this is the person we want to vote for, or this is the person we have cast our ballot for. They want to see, okay, fine, well, once they do that, the person should be able to, take the helms of affairs. But by the time there's this issue about going back to the judiciary to try and either bring the person or to make the person concentrate on his duty, and the person is always going from one court session or proceedings to the other, it gives the whole process begin to lack confidence. And so what we should be looking at is to make the electoral process a bit stronger, and stronger in the sense that the electoral act to the National Assembly have to start looking at making laws that will make sure that once the elections are over on the field, nobody should be able to say, I'm taking it to the court. And that is where this particular National Assembly should look at the Electoral Act again, to amend it to make sure that once the elections are over, nobody should be thinking of going to the courts. Elections are done. Yeah, the world over, people go to the courts, and the courts are always open. But we should, be looking at moving the electoral process to ensure that once we finish on the field, we shouldn't be thinking about going further. Look at what the president is saying. He's in faraway Saudi Arabia, and he's saying, now I can concentrate on my administration, things like that. So I think what we should be looking at is to strengthen the electoral process, make sure that everybody comes out on the field, everybody is captured to vote, and once that is done, the INEC is also given the powers. Because once people lose confidence on INEC, they lose confidence on now, you can see even the lawyers, some of them are also complaining about the judiciary. Then what next? It means that even when you go out on the election day, the next thing you'll be thinking is, my person will not be, my vote will not be counted. And it poses a very great danger on our democracy.
So, what do you have to say about this, Tony Daniel?
Yes, what I want to say is that when a decision is taken, whichever way the decision goes, some persons will celebrate it, some will feel aggrieved. And when you feel that decision taken by a lower court, there's something you feel the lower court have not done, you have a right of appeal. Now, restraining in any way access to court is undemocratic, it's unconstitutional. That is one. Then two, it might lead to self-help. The court is the last resort. We've seen some beautiful pronouncements at the lower level. Some persons who won by whichever wrongful means, where their victory was set aside. So going to court is a normal thing. It's not because I'm a lawyer. I commend Atiku Abubakar so well, because he has the ability to have resorted to self-help, but he refused. He rather chose to go to court. He was confident that he was going to win the case. He followed it up to Supreme Court. The only other person that have done this is the current president himself. He did it 3 times. In 1979, if you might remember, when we had the Shagaria Olo saga, the issue was to-tell majority. Among the states we have, he scored 25% in some states. Then in the other state, he didn't score up to to-tell majority. And the Supreme Court took a decision which is realistic and objective. We don't want a situation where a bad precedent will be set. I don't want to go into a point canvas because it's a vexatious issue and it's very sensitive. Otherwise, I've told my friends, with respect to the team of lawyers Atiku had, I'm not criticizing them, you don't, if you celebrate a case outside the court, it won't help you in the court. If you go up and down to the media, that will not help you in the court. What you canvass in the court before the judge is what will be used to adjudge the matter, not the opinion or the cultural display or the propaganda that helps you. No, you understand? And when you have one point, no matter how big that point is, don't forget that there could be other points that might be used. You know, having said this, I think it has gone and come. My only point now is that in governance, I am highly worried of the fact that we don't obey court orders here.
Let's find a place to leave it, and we hope we will obey court orders in future. Thanks a lot, Tony Daniel. But let's quickly take a quick break. Still to come, uproar in response to Operation Positive Identification by the Nigerian Army. Military sources say the exercise is aimed at checkmating activities of criminals and those engaged in other crimes across the country. Committee for Defense of Human Rights and human rights lawyer Femi Falana are opposing to the proposed Operation Positive Identification by the Nigerian Army. According to military authorities, the exercise is aimed at checkmating activities of bandits, kidnappers, armed robbers, and ethnic militia. So why are some lawyers against the exercise? Political correspondent Ayodele Zubakun has details in this report.
On the 25th of September, the Nigerian Army announced that it will embark on a special exercise, Operation Positive Identification, nationwide. According to the military authorities, the exercise is aimed at checkmating activities of bandits, kidnappers, armed robbers, ethnic militias, and those engaged in other crimes across the country. During the operation, citizens are to be accosted on the streets and on the highways to provide documented proof of identification like national ID card, driver's license, or voter card to identify themselves. This move has received condemnation from civil rights groups like the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights, CDHR. In a press statement signed by its new national president, Osagi Obaiwana, CDHR says the planned exercise amounts to the infraction of Section 41 of the 1999 Constitution, which gives every citizen entitlement to move freely throughout Nigeria. For the former president of the West Africa Bar Association, Femi Falana, SAN, the rationale behind the program is not well thought out.
There's no law that says any Nigerian who cannot produce his identity card or voter's card or driving license or passport is deemed to have committed an offense and will be prosecuted. No law, up to now. It's a policy that should not be allowed. And we're going to take steps to frustrate it. General Buratai has to be told to go to the northeast and combat terrorism and allow the police to deal with armed robbery and kidnapping.
The human rights lawyer also faulted plans by the federal government to regulate the social media and combat hate speech.
Nigerians will not allow the people in government to use the machinery of the government to harass their political opponents. As far back as 1983, the Court of Appeal decided in the case of Otto Nwankwo and the state that if anybody feels offended by any publication, he should file an action in court to defend his reputation. But that our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression will be eroded if public officers are allowed to use the provisions of the law on sedition, criminal libel, and the rest of them to harass their political opponent, as it is the case now.
The CGHR urged the president to rather than pursue economic and social policies that will address the root causes of crimes and win the confidence and cooperation of the people as a way of reducing deviant behavior to the barest minimum in the country.
Well, I still have in the studio Tony Daniel, lawyer and human rights activist, as well as assignment editor of TVC News, Asukwo James. Well, let's begin with you now, Asukwo. Looking at the situation, which has generated so much reactions concerning the move by the Nigerian army. How would you assess the concerns raised about this proposition, even though the army claims it is to further secure the country against criminal elements?
Esther, I think people are just afraid, because of what the civil populace have been going through in the past, even present, talking about extrajudicial killings as well as illegal arrest and harassment and detention by, the members of the Nigerian army, as well as some other armed forces, apart from the police. Yes, we know the police has their own issues, but the Nigerian army, who originally, constitutionally, they are not meant, to mingle around the civil populace, because constitutionally, their duty is for insurrection, to suppress insurrection, and which is what they are doing in the northeastern eastern region of Nigeria. So this complaint is coming because of the fear that Nigerians have that once you begin to give powers to the Nigerian army, then what happens to the police? Constitutionally, it is the police that have the powers. And so Nigerians are afraid. They're saying that, okay, fine, it is just for the northeastern zone, but you have also included cattle rustling. It means that they are going to go to the north central. And you're also saying kidnapping. It means they're also coming down to the southeast or the southwest. So it means more or less this operation is going to spread around the country. And what happens to democracy? What happens to the constitution? So, and that is the greatest fear most people are having. And don't forget the national identity card that every Nigerian is supposed to have till today, as we are speaking, has not come to fruition. So many people don't have the national identity card. And from what we are hearing, JAMB is even trying to force it upon our children, who will be sitting for JAMB, and we are going to pay for it. Something that other clients is free. So if I don't have a national identity card and I'm moving, forget about that. There won't be roadblocks. I'm telling you, by the time they start this operation anyway, there will be roadblocks. And that is where they will tell you, once there's a kidnap somewhere, Nigerian army will definitely mount their roadblocks and begin to block people and say, where is your national ID card? And God help you if your driver's license is expired, then you know that you're in trouble. So the Nigerian army has nowhere to start and where to end. Because by the time we start this, that will be a very big problem.
My point taken there, Sukwa. Now, Tony, what do you make of this development and, of course, the likely implications?
First, I must say that the military must be subservient to democratic administration. That is one. Two, if intelligence, like the army have tried to claim that they never talked about positive identification operation the way it is being presented to us, but that they are trying to go after kidnappers and the rest. Kidnapping is a civil crime, and the police are there. Before now, we have the military and the police joint operations, successful ones. They could have continued in that light. If they feel that, I agree that a lot of civil crime are increasing, like kidnapping is becoming too rampant, armed robbery and all that. And the military has been complementary the effort of the police, even though we want to reduce their involvement. I think what they should have done is what they did, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. The military targeted some dark spots. We remember at Erekpo, they did area attack, and they do on the field or on the ground joint operation, and they were able to arrest some criminals. The criminals that killed 7 DSS operatives at Erekpo area. Some of them have been arrested and they are being charged. It was that operation. So the military could have done the same thing. You don't need to panic the populace. You don't need to panic the civilians that you are going on Operation Positive Identification. For what? For God's sake, we have the defense intelligence, we have the naval intelligence. Talking about naval intelligence, Navy have been fingered for disobeying court order, and that is bad. We have the almost all military forces. They have their intelligence section. The police have their own. The Air Force has. What you do is to collect what we call a joint military intelligence committee. And you can look at targets. These people are human beings. They stay somewhere to plan. Be more friendly with the civil populace to get information, because that's the only way you can get information. So I condemn that operation. I feel what they should have done is not to come out first. Is it that they want to test our reaction? I'm happy they have gotten what they wanted. The reaction is very, very fine and calculated. But what I advise them to do is that when you want to go against criminals, you don't want them. For God's sake, the criminal can go and get ID card too. And they're talking about ID card. They have not, the army have not insisted that it must be a particular ID card. You must have a form of identification. The police have been doing this. It is called stop and search. The police have been doing that. So what the military could have done is that if they are aware that Boko Haram are fleeing, improve on your intelligence gathering, and you know where they are. The police will go and check. And when they give you information, if you need to attack to apprehend these people, you come in. You don't need to go all over the streets and start stopping people. The civilians, we are all afraid, because in the past, where army has come out like this, we know what they have done. Look at what happened in is it Anambra State when IPOD, they were looking for, tried to dismantle IPOD. A lot of civilians suffered. Right. We saw pictures and the rest. Right. So to that extent, and then also a suit has been filed. We must learn to obey court order. Right. The military, the army knows that a suit has been filed, and that's why they came out quickly. Falana filed a suit against them. They came out quickly to say, oh, we don't mean it this way. Whichever way you meant it, there is a suit already. All right, then that's a fine place to leave it right now. Human rights lawyer and activist Tony Dania, thank you. And as well, our correspondent, Asukwa James, our assignment news editor, TVC News. Thanks a lot. And that's about it for this episode of Newsweek. You can follow us on our social media platforms for updates. We're on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram using the handle at TVC News NG. You can also get details of all the stories we're reporting on our website, tvcnews.tv. Until the next one, I am Esther Mohariola. Bye for now.